Good evening, friends. Firstly, I'd like to thank you and welcome you all for sparing time to come on a working day evening uh, for discussing this project, which is very close to our hearts in more than one ways, like not only as professionals, but also as citizens of this city and also nationally. People are all very concerned about it. Um, and I know there will be many queries and points of discussion on this. Um, so let us all welcome Dr. Bimal Patel, who will present the scheme so that we can understand and what is the real proposed scheme and what is the hot air going around in the social media, because a lot of that we keep getting on our phones every day. So I think this is the best way to hear it from the horse's mouth and understand what the proposal is. So let us all welcome him. Please, Bimal.
Thank you all for coming. I truly appreciate it. Thank you for organizing this, IUDI, ISOLA. I think this is it's very good that we are doing it. Let me just get on with the presentation. I'm trying to manage some pain, so I'm sitting. I can't stand up like I normally want to, but I'll just point to this screen whenever I have to and get on with the work. So the Central Vista project, uh, reimagining and renewing a national icon. Let me start by talking about how the Central Vista was imagined in very briefly. Um, we all know that when Lutyens and Baker designed this, they were inspired by Washington's Capitol complex and Paris's Champs-Élysées. These were great projects, part of the nation building complex of these nations, and they wanted this to be the living center of administration in India and house all the facilities needed for efficient functioning of government and be an architectural icon for the government of India, which of course at that time was the Raj. It wasn't our independent India. Here are well-known images. That's the Washington Mall. That's the Capitol here. Lincoln Memorial at the other end. Here you have the Louvre, and you have Arc de Triomphe at this end. And at the same scale, you have India Gate here and Rashtrapati Bhavan. They were really they were looking at this when they did this. Here are some more images of that. Here you have Washington, you have Arc de Triomphe here, Paris, and here you have Rashtrapati Bhavan and Central Vista. The architects going on a site visit at that time. Fortunately, we don't have to do that any longer. But here is the hills of this area being flattened. This was not, the lovely flat site that you have, flattened to make space for the Central Vista. The standard Beaux-Arts device for creating an architectural icon of this sort. You have a grand avenue of trees that sets up an axis. You have a focal point at the other end, Viceroy's house, north and south block. That's the grand axis in the middle. And in the flanks, the supporting flanks, there was an idea of building administrative buildings on both sides. Nothing got settled finally, and these didn't get built. And at the termination of this axis, you had India Gate and the canopy. So that's your basic architectural frame. That's what got built. You have Rashtrapati Bhavan, North Block, South Block, Council House, actually not Viceroy's house, that was Kingsway and Queensway, and landscape got done here. The road network got done at that point. And you can see here an image, empty plots on both sides. The archives building is done, you have Council House, and the rest, you know this quite well. Here's another representation of the same thing. This is, in a sense, what we inherited. Now, there's no doubt that this was a spectacular architectural achievement, and although it was built to house a colonial government, it was unhesitatingly appropriated by independent India's government as its seat. and appropriated by the people of India. Uh, Here you have Mountbatten leaving for the last time, and you have here the flag of India coming up. And on 15th of August, 1947, the people literally took it over by swarming all over it. And ever since, it has been a sort of a beloved, sort of an icon for us. Viceroy's house or government house became Rashtrapati Bhavan. The statue of George V was removed from the canopy. Council House became Parliament. This was never designed to be. And the North and South blocks had the most important ministries housed there. Now, the post-independence management of the Central Vista, unfortunately, was not as good as it could have been. It was not, the whole estate management was not informed by an inspiring and comprehensive architectural vision of any sort. Already by the Second World War, the plots on the two sides, which were empty earlier, were being taken over by barracks-like structures for a number of offices. And here you can see, right next to the council house, here you have structures built up. Here also this diamond has structures, etc. The only document that one finds that is being used to administer the place and its development is this document, which is really nothing more than a two-dimensional plotting plan. It doesn't have any three-dimensional element to it. And it's just a plotting plan that says, okay, well, that will be, Vigyan Bhavan, and this can be taken over by so. They're plotted and Delhi was growing. By this time, that's 1942. You have Delhi here, and that's the Central Vista here, and Old Delhi here. 1956, already Delhi has grown quite a bit. There's considerable pressure to start building facilities on the Central Vista. It's a lovely picture from 1962. Rashtrapati Bhavan here, North Block, South Block. By this time, you can see that Vayu Bhavan and Rail Bhavan have been created. These barracks-like structures are still there at the back. And you can see Krishi Bhavan, Udyog Bhavan built here. A new road was put across like that. So this water body was cut, and that is Rafi Ahmad Marg, didn't exist before. And so that's what you had in 62. What we inherited became a bit like this. This is what we have today in its place. The Central Vista today, I think just even the vision of it like this says that it's a bit disorderly, the development that came up afterwards. Of course, this is spectacular still, but this is rather disordered, incoherent. The architecture there is quite, disparate buildings, different languages, quite incoherent here. The uses that you have this place put to are, you have a lot of administrative facilities. It's a hodgepodge of uses. Administrative facilities, cultural facilities, legislative facilities, residential facilities, all sorts of things without some sort of a order in this place. What was meant to have all the offices of government actually has only half the ministries here. The rest of them are scattered all across Delhi. So you have 22 ministries scattered, or half are scattered outside. The powerful ones are here, but a lot of the other ones are here. Many of the plots have rather informal development. Those old barracks have now become established offices, and there's large amount of land. I mean, that is 20 acres, for example, its ground floor structure. Inside tall walls, but inside it's all informal and rather disordered, and a very, very poor use of land. Even the earlier one, and if you look at the buildings that were built, the footprint is small. The outside is a sea of parking. You still can't get parking here, and it's very difficult to add any new facilities. The buildings are laid out in a way that's difficult to add. If you look inside, many of you have been inside these offices. They are stressed, outdated, inadequate buildings, and really difficult to put in new infrastructure. There used to be a way of moving through these buildings. Because of security reasons, they have now that movement is also cut down. Actually, the Central Vista Avenue, as distinct from the whole Central Vista, this avenue also has been encroached upon by infrastructure and by parking facilities. So Nirman Bhavan, you go, there's a fence there's a hole in the fence. You go through it, there's another fence behind, and there's a parking lot at the back. which is really bang on the avenue itself. So there's a bit of encroachment here also. The landscape is lackluster. The national events take a long time to build up the whole thing and then to dismantle it. It's kind of clumsy, the arrangements. It's a great civic garden for Delhi people, and it's well used, well loved, but not that comfortable to use, as it's quite clear. There's no toilets, for example. There's parking is a problem, etc. Pedestrians don't have a good time. Tourists also, I mean, they're drawn to the place. This is a beloved icon of India, but it's really not the best place you can be. Nothing like inspiring capital complexes the world over. If you spend a day on the Washington Mall, you can spend it in comfort. It's a memorable experience. It's something that sort of helps build the whole story of the United States, and it's a fantastic achievement there. Canberra likewise has a terrific space also, and nothing like a walk down the Champs-Élysées. There's no government here, but nonetheless, this is a national icon because this used to be the Palace of the King, and that's the Arc de Triomphe, and that represents the nation state in a way that nothing else does. So that's fantastic places across. Now, many people, many in this room, have demanded that this Central Vista should be better administered, better developed, better maintained, and that its heritage should be protected. INTAC has said it, ISOLA has said it, everybody has said it, IUDI has said it, individuals have done it. There have been studies done, many by people in the room here, saying that, listen, this has to be better managed. And nothing has been done up to now. And this project, in a sense, intends to act on that in part and build on that. So what is this project about? And so let me explain the project. Before I start off, let me say that the master plan was a sketch master plan developed in response to very broad, very simply stated requirements and minimal information about the site. And as an architect, and like all of you, I was not surprised by this because clients often come to us with very minimal, build me a house, and you say, how many rooms? 4, and you draw something, and then the discussion starts, and the design evolves after that. And the information we got was this plotting plan, which was not very much used. These history books, there are lots of terrific books also published by Rashtrapati Bhavan, etc. There are these historical maps which one could use. And then thank God for Google, because nowadays from Google, the amount of information that you can actually download, frame drawings, levels, models of buildings is immense. So we do that a lot these days, and we were able to build up this 3D printed model out of basically Google information. It's pretty accurate, and that's what we did. And also we're able to build up that sort of a model based on that information from the Google image of that place, and develop a sketch which looked like this at that point. And that's what you must have, many of you might have seen the animation that was out, and that was the sketch that was there. Now, over the last 3 months, after October, the master plan has evolved considerably. As you all know, design is not a process of coming up with one idea. You come up with an idea and hope that it survives the evolution. Sometimes you have to throw out the original idea and start from scratch. I think we didn't have to do that, but if you look at the different dates, 24th October, things start moving around as we as we start talking with people within government, and it keeps going. 24th December, 4th of January, and it will continue to evolve. Not in big ways, but now in smaller ways, but it continues to evolve. And later on I can discuss some of the things that have happened as we have found out more information about this place. As we see more opportunities and we see more problems, okay. So here's the 4th January plan that I'm going to talk about, and it's evolved even since then in minor ways, not huge ways, but so what is this project about? It has multiple objectives. It's not one objective, it has multiple objectives. And so let me start with the first one, which is modernizing Parliament's facilities. Now you look at Parliament House, we first had to understand the existing facilities. Our original schemes said very little about what can be done. So here's Parliament here. We started with the historical drawings. We all know that Baker actually intended to make a building like this, but Lutyens almost sort of forced him to make the round building, which we now all love and like. And so the drawings of them, of this building, as you can imagine, are in very poor shape. They are being redrawn so that we can start using them. Elevations are the old ones like this. There are no computerized drawings or a nice, perfect portfolio available. That's developed in our office, drawn up, just to appreciate and understand the architecture better. You know that we draw things to learn about them. We also listed all the space utilization. There is no sort of modern estate management plan that tells us who sits where, and that's it's a complicated building. What are the adjacencies like? Who sits next to whom? What are the movement routes? What are the circulation routes in this building? And they're very elaborate and very complicated requirements. Mind you, this building wasn't designed to be Parliament. Everybody has adapted to it, but now is wedded to the ways in which it is being used as the real way to use any bill, as to organize Parliament. Any case, we need to know this as we go ahead. We've, measured on the furniture because that's the key thing. You sit here and you debate. All the furniture here, different ways of arranging. What are the different facilities in this place? What are the additions and alterations to this building? There used to be these natural light windows at one stage, which of course have been blocked, and these harsh lights have been put up there. Parliament was never meant to have these two floors on top originally, but these two floors were added afterwards by Baker himself, but in the late 50s, early 60s. The drawings are from the late 50s. So what we know now, whatever expansion could be done on the building has already been done, is what was done. If you look at the Lok Sabha Hall, this is the columns here, behind which used to be a corridor, but the expansion needs in the 50s, meaning the seats have been built right up to the edge. You can see in the plan here, the hall is jam-packed, 552 seats. If you want to add a single seat more here, it's not possible to do so. And keep that in mind, because that's the operative reason for why we need a new hall, one way or the other. The central hall is a place where twice a year the joint session of Parliament meets, but the central hall too has not enough space, so all the aisles they have to put in chairs, and it's a fire hazard, big risk, and when the Parliament expands, there definitely will be no seat for both chambers to meet together. This hall is also used as the lounge, because there is nothing called a lounge there. So this becomes a place where they have chai, coffee. There's a chai coffee thing just in this corridor as you enter, and you come and you find this is a place where ex-parliamentarians, etc. hang out, and that's where they they meet everybody, talk. Very important business, because it's in these deliberations that our country functions, but nonetheless happens in a hall with furniture that's not meant to be a lounge. The equipment here, you can see, I don't need to say much more. Some of it appears to be almost antique. They are trying out new stuff, but it's very difficult to add new equipment into this existing infrastructure. If you look at the innards of the building, those of you who understand buildings can imagine this. These are the symptoms of having 3 jurisdictions and additions, alterations. Lots of the air conditioning equipment on the terrace looks like this. Water seepage looks like this. Cables running in. This is not your 21st century Parliament, and this is not how you can take it forward. You cannot, the thought of adding new communications infrastructure into this, you just give up. You say, how am I to do anything in here? Earthquake safety risk in Delhi has been ratcheted up. Building is old, no drawings. No structural expert is willing to certify whether it is safe or unsafe, because there is no data. Tests are necessary. All of them say, and the people who have worked on restorations, for example, Victoria Terminus, etc., in Bombay, they say, listen, it's wise to assume that major retrofitting will be necessary to bring it up to grid, but we cannot figure out anything without invasive tests. So, conclusion, it's a great symbol of our vibrant democracy, but if we want to expand seats, and they need to go up to 900 from 552, so not 1 or 2 or 10 or 20 or 30, the projections are 900, I'll explain why. Infrastructure modernization has to be done, and if structural safety concerns are there, then we have to create a new facility with a larger hall, basically. Larger hall is the operative thing. And then the old building can be retrofitted, and what now we have come to the conclusion that the two buildings can work together, not as separate buildings, but some of the old facilities continue to remain in use. So perhaps the ensemble together can work, and that becomes the parliament rather than a new parliament and an old one or whatever. It's just an extension, and the two work together. So the plot for that is this one right next to it, presently fenced, presently parliament compound is this diamond. Inside here are some reception offices, security offices, air conditioning plant, electrical equipment, car parking, and some lackluster garden, but that sort of stuff. So that's the plot. It's designated legally as a garden plot, but there's nothing garden about it in reality at this point of time. And this is where a new facility can be put up, and this triangular building is what we are developing the design for. So the architecture of this facility is also in progress. It's a complex building. Security, Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha, the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs, all of them have offices there. The catering, the cleaning, there's a whole host of things. You can imagine what it's like. And so the plans here are also daily evolving as we have meetings with the staff and we start and figure out how to get this going. There are models, etc. So that's just a view from our studio that shows this stuff. These plans, but I'll tell you in a nutshell what is being planned. Of course, the parliament will continue to be in this diamond. Presently, you enter from here and here, and now there will be perhaps one more entry from this point, and the two would work together. I'll go fast over this. If you look at the old building, what you have here is a corridor all around. Then you have offices running all around here. Then you have chamber for Rajya Sabha. There's a corridor running like that. Chamber for Lok Sabha. That's the lounge of the Lok Sabha, this round thing here. Lounge of the Rajya Sabha. That's the central hall. That's library, and these are the open to sky courts on the in the middle here. So the new building at same scale, you have offices all around. Offices here will continue to be used. There's no question. We need more offices. This is the Lok Sabha hall, Rajya Sabha hall, and a open to sky courtyard with lounges for and dining facilities on top. If you look at the ground floor plan, still getting there, but different entries, 6 entries, ceremonial entries. I'm not going to get into details of what this is about. If you look at that, you know, that's Lok Sabha hall. That's with the public seating galleries, etc., and offices on all sides, and a foyer in the middle that is. And the top floor, of course, has this has double height or triple height, and so they continue to have offices, and that's the triple height on top. So that's still, but it's still evolving. Today there was a meeting for security. I'm sure that something's going to have to change. You all know one tries to get this very rigorous geometry, and we start with a 5-meter gradient didn't work, and 5.5 and 3.5, and seems like 3.65 is going to work, but that's the grid. My guys tell me that we're going to have to go back to 3.6, so perhaps that. Sections, elevations being worked out right now. The key point is that we are constantly making references to the old parliament. The two are going to sit next to each other, and from a distance it should appear as if the two are completely related to each other. So if that's the section of the old parliament, that's the section of the new building here, you know, they don't have to be exactly the same. They're not trying to mimic it, but it's tone, it's similar language. The two sit together next to each other, and that's what. So the two are like that right next to each other, and that's just a 3D, quick 3D of it. The seating is a big deal here. We studied world over different types of seating arrangements. I'm going to continue with the horseshoe-shaped seating arrangement that we have. It's worked well for us, and everybody agrees that it does good. Sorry. That's a scale comparison. Sorry, that's a scale comparison of the red is the present hall, and the new one is 900 seating. 900 seating because, you know, when we started off, each MP represented 15 lakh people of India. Today, it's something up to, I think, 20 or 23. By the time the freeze on expansion goes in 2026, we should be around 25 or something like that, lakhs per MP. If we stay the same size, when India becomes 1.7 billion, it's going to be a real problem, but it's going to have to be expanded. There's a terrific paper by a guy called Milan Vaishnav on the different dimensions to this. 850 seems to be the projection when India's population peaks and then starts dropping. 850 is, so 900 is what we have been told we have to hit. We are not going to do a joint session hall, and the Lok Sabha hall is supposed to double up as the joint session. So it's also at some point going to have to seat 1,300 people in one big hall. How do we do it? Well, the seating furniture arrangement very important. Seating type, whether, you know, choices are bench, swivel chair, sofa, bench without armrest, with armrest, seat size, the present mean 400 by 500 dimension, or should we make it bigger? Desk, presently only the front two rows have desks in front. Everybody complains saying, kuch bhi rakhne ki jagah nahi hai. And so, do we provide or not provide movement? You have to walk in front of your colleagues to sit down in your middle seat. So, should we get a different arrangement and not have this? Standing space, you speak when you from your desk, or you go to some other place and speak. That makes things easier, but still that's not our style. And capacity is the other issue. So we looked at seating arrangements. If this were our hall and we use the present mean arrangement that is there, then we would be able to house 1,500 people in this hall. It would work for joint sessions, but nobody wants to have this mean arrangement. They want to have better. Perhaps we could give everybody desks like the Egyptian parliament here, and then we would have 1,000 people seating here. What we are going to go for, to cut a long story short, is to have benches for 2 people so that people can come on both sides and sit down, and you don't need to walk in front of people. So these sort of 2 people benches, but wide enough to hold 3 people. So it's a 1,300 or 1,350 length of bench. Generous seating when you have 2 people, but 3 people can sit, and even then it will be better. And that becomes the joint session hall. So that's the idea in this place. There are other issues of whether we can have radial aisles in the Rajya Sabha. I'm not getting into that. We threw out these options of sofas like the Singapore Parliament and the German Parliament. We threw those out. Mock-ups of furniture like this, because every centimeter counts in this. That's the kind of design that is being done. Technology, very important. Acoustics, not just to remove echoes, but perhaps to do it much better. To have, good acoustics can set the mood in a hall. Philharmonics do that. We found a good company here, Veneclasen, that is a San Diego-based company full of physicists, and they do acoustics, and they have a Gurgaon office also. 2 years ago they set up, they've done the German Parliament. I think we are in good hands with them when we work with them, that they're asking the right questions. So lots of acoustic design that is informed by the best practices world over. Lots of public address translation system issues here. Lots of technology for this. Once again, the same firm is helping us do that. Lots of digital information technology, voting systems, etc. All of this is technology, but all has to be integrated well. More importantly, has to be upgradable, because this will all become redundant in 10 years again as technology improves. So let's see where we go with that. This building has to celebrate our nation and our democracy, and this is how it's lit up, and that's our favorite sort of symbol, and perhaps someday there'll be something like this and a beam of light. There's proposed chambers for members of parliament. Our members of parliament don't have any office space, so CPWD builds little bits and pieces in their residence here, there, etc. So two plots here, the present Transport Bhavan office, which I'll explain later on where it will move, and Shram Shakti Bhavan. Here perhaps build 1,000 chambers that have offices for all the parliamentarians right near Parliament, so it's walking distance, perhaps even underground access possible here. We haven't worked on that. That still till Transport Bhavan moves, we have time lag on that, and so it's just a basic idea, and feasibility has been checked. Now the second big chunk of this project is the Central Secretariat, and the Central Secretariat is driven by the idea of improving productivity and efficiency of administration here. This is Central Secretariat. We're talking about this central space in the middle, the two flanks, the administrative buildings. We know as architects and management experts know that the productivity of organizations and the efficiency and sustainability of organizations is hugely affected by how the spaces are designed. So every year probably we get new books on how office spaces ought to be designed and how the culture of work can be. So we hear about Google doing a new type of office, and this is a major place of innovation. Productivity in organization, how much gets done for every hour worked, is dependent on cooperation amongst members. This is one of the key things, how people cooperate, and that is affected by proximity and clustering, which is why you have cities with higher productivity. It's affected by ease of formal, informal interaction and the time spent on getting to work. These are the key elements, and these are the drivers for productivity. Efficiency is facilities management practices. If you are going to have separate conference rooms for everybody, you will just make it inefficient. It costs more, for example. Scale of operations, larger the scale of operations, the more benefits you can reap of scale economies. Scale economies can be reaped here. And technology of office infrastructure, including doors, windows, energy efficiency of buildings, and eventually sustainability, all affected by design of office buildings. We are not very well served by our present buildings. First of all, there is no clustering, and so anybody who has seen a clustered office functioning, even government offices function better when they are clustered. Maharashtra has that, Gujarat has that. It is obvious when one visits them. If you look at the present cluster of buildings, about 25,000 people work in these facilities here. And you look at the buildings, they are now not well maintained over a period of time, poor quality of construction now. The service integration is awful, very costly air conditioning, the inefficient use of land, I already said. Equipment inside is like, everybody has put in new security equipment, etc. Doesn't work. The architecture of the place is incoherent in many ways. And improving productivity and efficiency by building a central secretariat is one of the key aspects of this project. So here, if you want to increase efficiency, you want to increase productivity, you want to go from the present scatter to a higher productivity place, at least infrastructure that promotes higher productivity and higher efficiency. And as we all know as architects, everything moves you up this. First, simple things you can do is facilities management, share offices. You don't need new buildings for that. Furniture layout, etc., promotes certain styles of functioning. Open plan offices, for example, will do something different. Services, you know this stuff. Building skins, new buildings, location, all of this. Each one of them costlier to do, but well worth it in pushing up levels of productivity. So these 4 plots are what we are talking about. This is where the Central Secretariat is proposed. It has 3 components. It has 10 buildings, 10 office buildings, modular, and this is the central conferencing facility, and that's the archives building here. So archives, conferencing, and office buildings, that comprises and that's here you have the 10 buildings, you have the central conferencing facility and the archives. That's your Central Secretariat as presently envisaged. Office buildings, they are these 10 buildings in 4 plots. They bring all the ministries in one place. They are sized to bring everybody in one place. It's a transit-oriented development that a lot of us talk about. This is two metro lines passing through here. The way to improve public transport is last mile connectivity, as they say, or the ease of getting to metro. I always, when I land at T3, I take the metro and come into town. But if I land in T1, I call my car there, because just getting to the metro is too much of a problem. So to make that ease here, at the underground level, what we are exploring is the possibility of connecting, giving a sort of a direct access to a people mover of this sort, shuttle that underground, which is also moving inside government compound in a sense, and it takes you to the basement of your buildings. Many of you have been to Singapore and Hong Kong and been to the airport there. The terminal to terminal connectivity is done in this way, so that you come down escalators, get into something, get out the other side. And that's what we are attempting here, not fully worked out. More on it as it gets worked out now. And that's like the underground. We're still getting the drawings of the metro together, etc. It's a complicated thing, and the transport engineers are working on it. In addition to this, of course, there's parking, car parking for a portion of the people who will work here, and there is buses running, coming up to here, and maybe an overground shuttle. So that's where your underground shuttle will run. Now we look at these buildings. That is, mind you, mark my words, everything that is to be built is inside presently fenced compounds. There's nothing that is to be built outside of presently built compounds. There's never was a plan to build anything outside fenced compounds. So there's no appropriation of public space. I'll tell you, in fact, some of these places where actually the buildings go out, the fences are being brought in, and therefore there is an expansion of public space here and in other places. So this will remain a secure compound. Let me say something about this very quickly. Security becomes a big problem when the VIPs have to mingle with the public. It becomes, then the public bears the brunt of that security. If the VIPs are put away in secure compounds, or if the VIPs, or whatever you might call them, have been provided separate access, then the public is free to move and less disruption for the public. That's the philosophy based on which we are going. That's how, for example, you go to US Capitol Complex, you can walk into places because everybody that's important is coming through underground passages to your place. And they are not brought anywhere near the building in a car outside except for ceremonial occasions. And that's what the philosophy. So this is presently fenced, only there are vertical divisions here. Those divisions will be removed. It's that same fence, and yes, the fence is porous. It's not a tall wall like the ones with, but nonetheless secure. There is zero entrance going to be given from Rajpath side onto these buildings. Once again, the entrances remain from Maulana Azad Road, for example, here, or from the side here, not from Rajpath side. There's a loop road inside, the entrances here, exits here, all this being worked out with number of cars, crowd management, what is the security arrangement here, etc. Basement access, fire tender access into these donut-shaped buildings. A huge basement, combined basement, much economies of scale here. You can see these are three basements here, 1, 2, 3, one donut-shaped building, another, and the third. These are the entrance points, ramps, access ramps here. The blue is all a sea of parking, and you have amenities, infrastructure, and vertical movement up here. You can see what's planned here. This is that underground shuttle that brings you here, and escalators that take you to the arrival hall. This is all underground. If you look at the building, one singular building here is 155 meters by 134 meters now, 81 by 60 courtyard in the middle. The courtyard is landscape. Think habitat center with larger courtyards. In the ground floor, the main entrance is from the Rajpath side, because that's the sort of more important side. But you don't bring your car in from that. The car you bring here, go through the loop road, come to that place. So no cars from the Rajpath side. There is also secondary entrance from the other side. On the ground floor, you get big exhibition hall. It's rational, simple, efficient plan, difficult to get lost, unlike present day government buildings, which are mazes where you get lost. There is amenities here, circulation all around, cafe on the ground floor, On the typical floor, I'm not getting into detail, these are all the workspaces, these are the infrastructure, amenities, and circulation. So that's very simple sort of an arrangement. If you take a section across here, that's a 8-floor building, no basement in the center of the courtyard, so we can grow full-grown trees there. We can have full-grown trees there, and that's what it's like. From the Rajpath itself, because the tree line, you simply presently also cannot see the buildings. These buildings also will not be seen. So continue that when you are on Rajpath and walking on the pedestrian axis, the focal point is still just that, the view will be just that, that's the aim, and the view on the other side will be just that, nothing changes. Perhaps the landscape becomes much better and the paving, etc., is improved. And that's where the buildings would sit, that's where the basements are. If I take a section in the other direction, that's the basement, these are the other buildings. The height of the buildings is below the top of India Gate, and that's 42 meters, so it's below. We are working on the possibility of lowering it further, but the highest it will go is this, and that's what we are at this point trying to design for. And many elevation studies, etc., are going on. This has to do with energy efficiency, use of the buildings inside, etc. I'm not going to get into details. That's the building, stone on the outside, a lot of glass on the inside to capture as much light as we can. But when the trees grow, this just becomes a landscape plaza. Now that's very early drawing. I was debating whether to put it or not, but you guys know that's early stage. Central Conference Center here, that's your Vigyan Bhavan type of facility. That's out here, right next to the archives, and that's what will be. Nothing done on that because that's still, for me, a little bit further down the road. So the archives building, all of us know, that's out here, and that's what is planned here. Let me just explain. That's the old building. That's the old drawings, lovely drawings available of it. Ugly additions like this, that's a security office attached to this building, security barracks, not office. There is a new addition at the back that's not serving the archives very well just now. That's what the archives buildings look like, could do with a little bit of retrofitting and a little bit of cleaning up. And that's the new facility right next to it, which is really not serving the purpose of the archives very well just now. They need lot. They do heroic work inside here. I was just stunned. If somebody has not seen it, you see it. But they're all bundled up in their jackets. And moldy walls, and they're dealing with manuscripts that are 300 and 400 years old. Heroic work. They deserve better facilities. That's the public. That's the old building. Terrific. Restore. Keep it the public face. That's what the archives will continue to be. So that's the old archives building, and that will continue to be what it is. This is the actual original. This was a poor edition, but poor edition from older times, and still the halls inside are quite nice. The joint here is very poor if one looks at it, but this building, by moving it and putting a new facility here, which is modern, which has parking below, etc., we will do much better and create a modern office infrastructure and labs, etc., for the archives here. So I'm done with the Secretariat. Now I'll move faster. Adequate facilities for Vice President and Prime Minister. Vice President presently is in this bungalow here on Central Vista. The location is really not appropriate for the place, security-wise and otherwise, symbolically also. And very poor facilities inside there if you've actually seen them. Many of them are actually temporary, the barracks for the security staff, etc., all built temporary because you're not allowed to build anything here. And so here on north of North Block are hutments, which are hutments meaning offices, old barracks converted now into old barracks offices, and they will be moved, and the 10-acre plot here becomes the Vice President's residence in this place. Facilities for Prime Minister, present residence is LKM, and here you have barracks here, which are also to be moved, create space for the Prime Minister's residence and the SPG compound. So the disruptive travel gets reduced and further reduced because the barracks here are to be removed, and this plot houses the new PMO. Present PMO is in the south block here, the last far end of it. That comes to this place here. That's down below, lower than the buildings here. Don't know much more about this except that the building will be here and there'll be a garden here. It's presently fenced compound, let me say that once again. It's presently fenced, it's barracks used by defense. So we don't know nothing much more about this because that too happens a little further down the line. We know location, we know feasibility, that's being checked. Now, something that the landscape people are interested in, but we have done very little work on also at this point. The Central Vista Avenue, that's what we are calling it, as distinct from Central Vista as a whole. The avenue, that's this space here in the middle, so presently, essentially what we are doing is studying it. Once again, for us, this is a phasing issue. The work cannot start for a while. It's not to start till later, 1 year down the line. So we're not working immediately, and I hope that we will have an opportunity to discuss the designs of it in much more depth when something is ready. But presently, we know clearly that the attitude is set. Presently, you have haphazard parking, tired landscape, poor furniture, you know all this stuff, ad hoc vending, facilities for events and activities are lacking, poor quality lighting, inadequate signage, poorly maintained water feature. These are standard laundry list of all the problems with a lot of public spaces. And you look at the landscape itself, it's old and the trees have gone away in a lot of places. You people know a lot more about this, and the idea is to make it better by doing some of the things that many of you are already doing in Delhi, which is to make the landscape more lively, to ensure that the water feature is more sustainable, and here are examples from what is being presently done. Maybe the parking can be better organized, maybe the pathways and footpaths can be done better, maybe the signage can be done better, it's already being done better, the seating can be better, the planned vending areas can be better organized. Same uses, exactly the same uses, it's still a civic garden, it's to be maintained as a civic garden, to be maintained as a great tourist attraction. Perhaps build some pedestrian underpasses so that the traffic can move freely and the pedestrians can go below, and the traffic also gets a chance to glance at the great vista that we have. Maybe the space in front of India Gate is paved rather than have tarmac of this sort. So simple, improve the quality of lighting. We're already doing this all across the country. People are doing better jobs, and facilities for events. So I stop at just talking to you about the attitude. Nothing to be changed except everything to be upgraded. People keep asking me, is the experience going? It's not going to change except if you say that, it feels better. To walk on paving, that's better. Well designed, signage is, everything is better. Let me come to the fifth point, which is strengthening cultural recreational facilities in the Central Vista. First of all, IGNCA, which occupies this 24-acre plot with a few buildings, just 300 people working in there. And it is to be relocated in this 15-acre plot, which is the Jamnagar House plot, has government compound just now. It is not accessible to the public just now. But to make a lot more publicly accessible facility is what the IGNCA people want. They want, obviously, it's right across from Hyderabad House, so in some way it's going to have to mirror the architecture. One portion of the building at least will mirror the architecture in some ways, and the other end of it could be the other new facilities that are needed. The present facilities also do not serve them very, very well. They need a lot more facilities than what they have. So that's being worked upon. The program is being worked upon, and that's the site that's being. National Museum, which is at present out here, the idea is to move the National Museum to North Block and South Block. So these become the grand national museums of the country, and perhaps the South Block has all the artifacts and things of India up to 1857, and perhaps the North Block has India after 1857, the idea is to make a more programmable museum of the kind that you see world over. Calcutta, here you have the Victoria Memorial, converted an earlier fortress or a seat of government turned into a public space. Well, the same with this. Here, once again, the Palace of the King being turned over to the people, in a sense, a big gesture on the 75th anniversary of our independence. So that's, that's the fortress that was built to really run government from. And someday maybe you get people walking up and this fully becomes public and you have banners and exhibitions out here. Or you have North Block here, and that North Block becomes, it's very poorly, it doesn't work well as an office building, but you're all capable of imagining how this could become a great museum for the country. New India Gardens, the idea of extending the axis up to the river has long been talked about, and originally also that everything is built up in between. So the access route from here can be worked out better. The pathway can be better. Perhaps some great separation at this place here where you have major highway. But make it easy for people to access here, go to Purana Killa, come here, go to the park, and on the Yamuna itself create a small park that is the New India Garden, 75th year of Indian independence, commemorated with an installation at this place to be designed through a competition, nationwide competition type of installation here. At the rear end, on the other side, that's the western end of the axis. The idea is the area at the back of Rashtrapati Bhavan looks like this at present. That's Mother Teresa Crescent here, and that's Rashtrapati Bhavan here. This is the line is the estate, 392 acres. This is all the facilities inside Rashtrapati Bhavan for all the people who live and work there. About 1,200 quarters in here. That's the secretary's residence. That's guest houses. That's a football club for all the people who are here. Here's a place, a community guards, community place for their functions, etc. But this land at the back here has vegetable gardens and has basically a bubble forest at this place. So, idea is, could around 48-acre area be carved out? Some of the facilities that are in here, nursery, etc., be moved to this little patch here, and could this be turned into a publicly accessible biodiversity arboretum with an entry from the rear? So it would have greenhouses. So this is all eventually the bubble, but forested essentially, but having greenhouses here. So the idea just now, just a basic sketch, is to have greenhouses with different phytogeological zones of India, and to house all the endangered species of India in one place here, and make this like the symbol of that concern for endangered species here. And so what looks like this at present and is accessible, the Mughal gardens are accessible once a year, the public is allowed in, becomes a permanently accessible park here at the back. So two big gestures. Here, expand public access into North and South Block, turn them into museums, what essentially government secure areas, turn them over to the people. What's at the back here, which is also not accessible, essentially a vegetable garden, turn it over to the people. Commemorate 75 years of India's independence by what I talked about, extending the vista from here to here, notionally, not literally, because this is already built, etc., and expanding public space. So presently the public space is here. These are all fenced compounds here, all of them, and really very difficult. This is the public area. Expand it here by adding 27 acres on Raisina Hill, and add 48 acres at the back here, 75 acres turned over to the public to commemorate 75 years of India's independence. So that's kind of the big move. Perhaps a transit shuttle that takes you around, up and down, improve the facilities so that people can come here and this. So in some sense, reimagining the vista, this represents the nation, the geography through the biodiversity arboretum, people, the president, the history through the big museums that you put here. Then you have the legislature and the executive administration in the middle, culture at this end with NGMA, IGNCA, National War Museum, etc. And then you have leisure, recreation at the far end. So in some sense, a new way. And to sum up, two meta objectives. Can this be done fast? Does it have to be done like our traditional infrastructure projects? Can we build our capacity and confidence to proficiently do these projects fast is one of the ambitions. Very ambitious, difficult. We all know we are in the business, entirely dependent on all the people who are involved in it at the top, etc., cooperating and working towards one end. India doesn't do that very well. Cooperation is something that we are very, very poor about. And second, another meta objective is that many years of neglect in our cities, all our cities, not just one, we are convinced that nothing can be done about it. Can we do something about it? And to show it through a demonstration project of this sort. I'll stop with that. Thank you very much. Lots of people involved in this project. I get the privilege of talking about it. I also take the responsibility for my team here, but here you have the ministry and everybody working hard. You have the CPWD team, the DG, and everybody working hard. You have my team. These are people from my office working on it. We have a whole host of consultants because we are only architects and urban planners and urban designers. And then we have some advisors working on it. And this list is bound to grow as we go along. I've already talked with Sujata about how some of the institutions get involved in this, and we start working together to make this happen. So with that, let me stop. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Bimal. Can I just ask Anurag now to take this discussion forward? There will be a small presentation by IUDI. Vikas will be presenting. After that, I'll just, talk about 4 to 5 points, and then we'll ask all our seniors to, and open the house for discussion.
Thanks, Bimal. As we were speaking earlier when we met in the lobby downstairs, the worst thing the government can do is not share information. And I think it's the first time everyone has seen this presentation. And as Sujata said earlier, we've been seeing bits and pieces, snippets of it on our little mobile phones. But what we do have now is a much better understanding of the objectives of the scheme and where you are with it. Earlier on, I think it was 3 months ago, IUDI and ISOLA and INTAC had gotten together for a meeting, and this is just when the competition was concluded, and we didn't really know much about the scheme. We had gotten together and written a document which expressed our collective concerns about what any development in the central vista should care about. That document was eventually sent on to the ministry, and I'm sure that you have seen it. The document was not meant to propose design solutions. The document did not aim to look at your design, because at that time we didn't have a design to look at. In any case, it's not our role to, at least I feel that it's not our role to sort of critique a design, but it is our role as concerned professionals in Delhi to look at concerns And so this is an older document, but this is what we presented, and Vikas is sort of going to go through it. And I think he'll just touch upon the highlights, and maybe it'll form part of our conversation later on in the evening. You want to move? You can see?
I can see that. I'm there only.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bimal sir, for your presentation. And as Anurag said that, this was a collective voice, and I'm representing the collective voice today of the three institutes. And we made this document as not much information was there in terms of development or redevelopment guidelines regarding Central Vista, which were prepared by any of the bodies in Delhi. So this was an effort by the three institutes, ISOLA, IUDI, and INTAC. And the key aspects in terms of for Central Vista guidelines and recommendations were put together through the 6-page document, which talked about the built heritage, urban design, and the landscape of the place. The documents highlights the key aspects in terms of it talks about the grand manner planning, and you have also touched upon all the key planning perspectives. And the two key movement that the Central Vista represented was the Green City movement and the Garden City movement. Both were put together, and the key points were highlighted through that. The document also talked about its connection from the ridge to the river. It talked about how it's a network city and how Lutyens envisaged it as a continuation, and by connecting all the 7 cities of Delhi spatially as well as visually. So visually it also connected Shahjahanabad to the Parliament. Visually it also the Aurobindo Marg even connects Mehrauli to Shahjahanabad. So all that it forms the structure of this Delhi city today. So all that was put together. I'm sure all our members have this document, as well as it was shared publicly with you. Yeah, absolutely, sir. So I'm not getting into the depth of everything here. Can we go ahead? So the urban design perspectives were kept into play, and I'm reading out the key guidelines that we suggested for making the Central Vista plan. Can we go ahead? The key highlights are already put in bold for you. So I'm just reading it so that all the members here also get the same perspective. So the collective assembly of the built form and the landscape needs to be recognized, preserved, and enhanced. The focal objects, which is the object in space, the Rashtrapati Bhavan and the India Gate, the space-defining envelopes, which is through the built form of the North and the South Block, and the built form along the movement paths, which is the Bhavans around the sea hexagon, should remain as such. Any future planning and design move should in no way violate such an urban gesture at the micro level, or no structures, buildings, markers, towers, or infrastructure elements should obstruct or destroy the existing visual quality of this composition along its expanse, its entire expanse from the ridge to the Raisara Hills and to the river Yamuna. The essential urban structure and character of Lutyens Delhi need to be protected, preserved, especially along the primary corridors of movement parallel to the Central Vista precinct, which is the Dr. Rajendra Prasad Marg and the Maulana Azad roads. Please go ahead. The proposed construction should not overpower the grandeur of the Rashtrapati Bhavan and North-South block assemble. The area of the North and the South, these two blocks in proximity to this assemble as well as around the Parliament building, need to have stringent urban design guidelines for any kind of addition or alteration to the present situation. Any proposed building or cluster of building are to be planned according to these guidelines and as per building bylaws, especially with regard to the building setbacks, building envelopes, heights, restrictions, and architectural vocabulary. High security areas like Rashtrapati Bhavan and Secretariat offices, as well as public functions like museums and open green public spaces are to be zoned accordingly. The publicness of the Central Vista with unfettered freedom of access to all citizens and the visitors to the entire area of the Central Vista need to be ensured, restored without any form of fencing, gates or barriers to the total length and breadth of the central open space. Alteration and displacement of this built form within individual plot should ensure continuity of built edge overlooking the Central Vista as well as adjoining transportation corridors. This continuity of form should be ensured at both the ground plane and skyline as visible from Rajpath and adjoining roads. Under no circumstances should there be sudden departure or sharp disconnect to this linear volumetric composition formed out of the buildings in individual plots. While these plots could be interconnected with free movement across them, they are not to be amalgamated for FAR, building bulk calculations, or for generating built units. Go ahead. The overall morphology of the streets and plots of this precinct should be retained. Under no circumstances should plot be amalgamated and dividing roads in between them arbitrated to create larger parcels either for built or open use. Apart from making the continuous boulevard experience of this precinct, such moves will compromise traffic movement and smooth operation of the roundabouts. Please go ahead. The disposition should be maintained for any change that is imagined in the special formation within the precinct. It is important that the string of the buildings along the C hexagon, through separate from each other, form a collective sequence of unified experience along the hexagon and encounters each form as they unfold. New functions proposed for this precinct should therefore use detailed analysis of adaptive reuse, retrofitting possibilities with respect to individual building types and arrive at an appropriate usage that could be incorporated in each of these buildings. Functional distribution across the precinct should be proposed to promote diversity and robust placemaking rather than monofunctional zones or areas. Go ahead. No plots in the precinct are to be bounded by high, opaque or semi-opaque surfaces that inhibit visual permeability between the public domain outside the plot and the development within. Plot edges that align with the Central Vista are to be retained with soft qualities with low boundary walls and vegetative cover with active frontages as determined by respective functional content within the plots. Built edges have to be adequately set back, minimum 9 meters, to allow the retention of existing trees as well as possibility of a green corridor along the entire length of the central space. These edges need to have pedestrian amenities and utilities apart from vending kiosk and information booth to provide a live interface between the Central Vista greens and the plots abutting them. In terms of the built heritage, along the Central Vista, there is a direct visual link from Rashtrapati Bhavan to Purana Kila. This important view corridor should be retained at all costs with no structure disturbing the visual connectivity. And then, INTAC had specified all the grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 buildings, and a plan was, annexed to the whole document. And also, INTAC mentioned very clearly that they have also applied for the twin World Heritage Cities, which are Shahjahanabad and New Delhi. The proposal has already been sent to UNESCO. So none of these buildings, should be taken away, or they should be thought out in terms of reuse or adaptive change. Please go ahead to the plan. Next page. So there was this plan which was appended with all the grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 buildings, which also has the National Museum, National Archives. Go ahead. And the houses. In terms of the landscape of the Central Vista, the soft and the hard landscape delineated as the area between the boundary walls of the building complexes on either side of the axis, like water channels, trees, street furniture, chain boulevards, light posts, gate posts, etc. of the original scheme, through which small are a very important part of the larger and simple experience along the central vista axis needs to be preserved. They also mentioned about the garden city concept and the relationship with the to the landscape and the built fabric and the synergy between the two. Go ahead. Just go up. Go up. Go up. Go up. 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 They mentioned the concepts of the planting and how the whole central vista has been planned through the concepts of unity, shade, symmetry, hierarchy, integrated design, and the background, which is the ridge, which needs to be retained. And of course, there are trees which are nearing 100 years. Some trees are dying, and the replacement is necessary. So these were the broad object guidelines that we had shared with you, and there were, after that, we had also asked for certain general procedures for development and the recommendation for way forward. Can you go to the slideshow, please? So, there are these four key things that we had recommended as a way forward when we had met, when IUDI, ISOLA, and INTAC had met you last time. And today we would like to know, what is the status of these recommendations, and if these, if certain things have been carried out further, we would like to also hear from you, what are your findings on these? Can we go to the first one? So the first one is the audit of the heritage structures and the landscape elements, which is required to establish the state of conservation and determine their strategies of intervention. This is to be followed by a detailed heritage impact assessment report with the proposal to construct new buildings, is approved. Go back, please. So can I request you to, can we go through these one by one?
The work of the heritage structures is not underway at this point because, as I said, it's detailed later. But we have quite a bit of a thesis on the landscape elements, what activities happen, the standard sort of an analytical study of base public space. So that's the share it with you.
Sure, and you also, today showed that there are three buildings. You're moving the IGNCA, you're moving the National Museum, as well as, there is also the Ministry of Environmental Affairs, Energy Affairs, External Affairs, which, has been, so we want to know the status of these buildings. Because we are moving these buildings, is there a study done that can we move these buildings, or we are demolishing these buildings and building new?
Now, we have not done any studies as of now of what can be done. The sketch plan that we are proceeding with is that this will be demolished.
Okay, okay. Can we go ahead? Yeah, sure. Only 3 slides. So we are asked for detailed pre-design studies of carrying capacity and impact assessment with respect to environment, energy, physical infrastructure, transportation. Because as we know, the FAR is being taken up, and there are 70,000 people who will be working here. So are there, transportation studies conducted?
The transportation study is underway. There are, as I explain to people often, is that you can do these studies in two ways. One is, what's the big picture? Do we want the central secretariat here? If you want the central secretariat here, it will create some problems. Those problems have to be solved. So your study is more in the form of what are the problems and how are they being solved. That is how all cities grow. No city in the world is, you do a study of its existing infrastructure and then say that, okay, now this is a constraint, we can't do anything further. What world over, what happens is, For example, Mumbai or Hong Kong or New York, uh, they're not like what they were in the 60s. There's far more use. How did this happen? By putting in more infrastructure. So instead of saying, let's study the present condition and find out what its constraints are, we're saying, okay, what is it that we want to do? What's the big picture for this area? What challenges which will be created by this? What is the present infrastructure? How do we solve it? It's in that mode that we are functioning at present. Therefore, there is no sort of first stage study saying this is what it is. It's tied in with the study of how the problem is to be solved.
Sure. Yeah, we're really glad to know that.
And indeed, that will be tied into all the permissions that we need.
Okay. And is there an environmental impact assessment done?
Yes, that has to be for the environmental permission that we have to take.
Okay. Can we go ahead? Detailed urban design and landscape guidelines for the overall development, as well as individual plots and spaces, is to be formulated prior to the preparation of DPR, and all design approvals are to be processed in strict accordance to the same.
But I don't know whether you're referring to us preparing some guidelines, because we're preparing the design, not the guidelines. In the sense that, okay, this is what the design is, keeping in mind, I think, all the principles that you talked about earlier.
Right.
How this basic, you have a basic structure doctrine, like our constitution doctrine.
Right.
Basic structure shall not be altered, and I believe that has been supreme right through. Basic structure, I don't think, is being altered. Keeping such guidelines
right.
In mind, in spirit, if not absolutely literally, we have produced a design. So now there is no guidelines to be prepared according to which we are going to produce a design. There's a design that's being produced. If there are comments regarding it violating certain fundamental aspects of the earlier guidelines, I'm happy to hear them. That's not good. So we're not going that. I mean, this is guidelines have to be prepared when you're preparing. You're the regulator. You're preparing the guidelines. Somebody else is going to do the design. We're not at that stage. We're at the stage of the design has to be prepared, keeping in mind whatever principles make sense for this area. And I believe that, I was pleased when I read the letter that in many ways what you're talking about, there is no disagreement about this, at least in our scheme from day one. Right. Whether it was the original proposal or today, there is no disagreement. I agree with. I'm complete agreement with the guideline. How literally to solve some of the problems, and how we are all designers, and we know that things might vary, but I don't think there's fundamental difference.
Sure. I mean, we're very happy with the procedure of our engagement, and we can again meet as you also said that we can also meet again after the design evolves. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Certainly for the landscape. That is
yeah. Given the environmental crisis that the city faces today, which is Delhi, guidelines and norms to achieve a net zero green development program have to be put in place and strictly enforced. Is there a strategic action plan to mitigate adverse environmental conditions and urban operations during the time of construction, which needs to be drawn up and approved prior to commencement of execution?
Yes, certainly. Let's take the second one first. I mean, to minimize the impact of the construction, there are a number of things that are already being thought about. For example, vast number of construction workers, where will they stay? So initially we started looking for some place where you create a workers' colony. Then soon realized that actually they can be situated very far away at the end of metro lines, and be brought in by metro every morning instead of, and if you have longer shifts. So that becomes a way of solving that problem. Sound barriers for sound, that is easy to do. Construction debris, how do you deal with it? How do you reuse the debris in the construction? That is being talked about, and that is being built into this idea. Also, one great way to reduce disruption is to build it fast, very fast, so that you don't have to suffer it for very long periods of time. And while it's ambitious, and I don't know how it will unfold, but I think one dimension of the ambition is, well, just if we have to take it, let's take it like an injection, not a slow. So that's for that. Net zero. I don't know sometimes what exactly is meant by net zero. You can't produce the electricity that's needed for this thing in this place. I mean, that's really, if you have some technology, I'm happy to hear about that. One key thing is when you put such buildings together, you inevitably, when you get such economies of scale and you saw the buildings and how sort of rational and straightforward they are, you get huge decrease in the amount of energy used per square foot. I don't have a quantitative assessment. All of us know from our work that it's bound to happen. Instead of having separate buildings with AC sticking out of windows everywhere. So at some point we'll have those energy numbers, and all the ratings, etc., are standard these days. Everybody asks for them. There is nothing. I mean, sometimes even if we, as many of us know, sometimes those things that you have to do to get those ratings are actually not very energy efficient. They're problematic. But even those will have to be done if we want to rate it.
All right, thank you. I'll hand it over to Sujata ma'am.
I'll just take 5 minutes and then open the floor to everybody. Just 5 points. One is quantum of open space available to us today. Are we decreasing it? So we need to have that question.
May I answer that as we go along? That's just simpler. That's just simpler.
Can you add more? I mean, this is one exercise where right now you talked about because the parliament, you're making a new parliament because the number of people are increasing who are using the space. So we need to also look at the open space is being used by more and more number of people. So this could be an exercise also in seeing can we increase the the quantum of open space?
Yeah, I believe I said it's 75 acres of new public space being added to this place.
Wait till you hear the next point, because from DDA we have got this notice which we responded to, that 80 acres of the open space is being converted into a different land use.
Ma'am, I don't really understand how that is interpreted. The plot next to Parliament at present is technically and officially a garden plot. There's nothing garden about it. You walk around it.
Green cover, so you can't.
No, 1 second. There is presently, there is all sorts of infrastructure there. There is no green cover. First of all, there are 2 things that public space does. One is it has to have public access.
Yeah, that's one.
Okay, and that's, I believe, a very important aspect of any public space. If you have green cover, you want to add green cover, you're creating, green cover where the MEA building is going to push in, for example. So perhaps when the new planting is done, you get that much green cover.
So these are the 5 concerns.
Yes, but I think I want to understand also how this is thought of. Presently, inaccessible land that has nothing garden-like in it, on file is a garden, is being converted to government plot. Present inaccessible President's estate is being converted into public space. Does that count for anything, or does it not count for anything?
No, it does.
Are we going to discard that and say what I have to take, what I have to get, what I'm getting I will not talk about? So I'm just trying to understand the mind better
there are
also.
2 points. That's fine. One is accessibility to the people to use it. Second is the green cover. So we're concerned about the both. So okay, so that's point number 1. And when you're talking about making that underground thing for the metro.
It's not metro, people mover, but okay.
Okay, no, so
Shuttle, underground
it's a
shuttle.
shuttle.
It's
so
different from a metro. Metro is like
yeah. So if you are connecting
Heavy
so that shuttle is going to connect the 2 metro lines. When you do the digging, even if you say, okay, I'm not disrupting the upper space, but you know that almost 25 to 30% of the area around would be disrupted. So is it possible to take that more towards inside your those fenced spaces? That's
Perhaps.
number 2.
Perhaps I didn't. I'll just go over it.
Yeah.
Perhaps I didn't communicate that clearly. It's inside government compound. I said that.
Okay.
I said it. It's not outside.
Okay. So, that
So,
was,
but there is a portion of it that will have to go outside, because if you want to complete the loop, it has to go outside.
Yeah.
It's grazing the buildings because you want to get off.
yeah.
So it's underneath the driveway of the building.
Yeah.
So it's not. It's intended to be that.
Okay. And of course, the services and all underground services also, we need to see that whether it just doesn't disrupt the green cover. And other point with this is, see, right now it's showing that the 3 blocks, all the 10 blocks exactly the same. And one of our colleagues had mapped the trees which are being cut, which was, I think, if I remember right, some 328 numbers. I don't know what was the number. Nikhil, do you remember the number? 270 to 80. So I'm saying, is it possible, like normally architects would just design a building, and if it's a block which is getting repeated, can we look at architectural form where the free cutting becomes minimum, or minimal? And then as you've done a very detailed study of how a parliament functions. So similarly, this whole open space, which is the most democratic open space we have, not only for the city but also for the nation, is can we do a detailed activity study, season-wise, day-wise, festivals, weekends and all that, and see how we can make that efficient, and also increase the performance of that space.
I completely agree with you. The design would have to be based on such a study. We have started on something like that.
Yeah.
We share it with you. If there are things that are left out, or if we can collaborate on some of these things, I'll be happy to do that. I'm absolutely no problem with that. So there's nothing, I mean, you are absolutely right. What we want to do is to take the place, how it is used, improve its facilities, and use it better. Okay? And so therefore it has to start with a mapping.
Yeah.
And the mapping, whatever we've done, I'll share it with you. Happy to share it with you.
And then one was that imagery, the look and feel of the place, which is to maintain the integrity of, because we think it's a cultural heritage or cultural landscape, even if it's just.
You mean the landscape? You mean the trees?
The whole feel of the central vista, that whole open space,
Yes, ma'am. I believe that I said
Which
that too.
Of course, I'll request my senior, Praline is here. She would kind of take up this point and discuss further on it.
Yeah, I believe I
And,
agreed with that point to start with. But sure, I'm happy to hear what you have to say.
And I'm kind of requesting Praline to just broaden this point further.
Well, that's a little sudden, but I'll say something. Dr. Patel, I just have 4 as you were going along, I just made these 4 points. They're one-liners, so maybe some of them have been responded to, but you made the analogy of any project which comes, maybe a house, and then you slowly build on it. I think that analogy is a little sort of misplaced, because a house is different from a project like this, which is a public project. So we can't we shouldn't have treated it like that. And maybe what I'm saying is implicit in what Anurag had mentioned, that the more the government hides, it becomes a problem. So I wish there had been a different approach to it.
May I respond to that straight away?
So no, if I can just
Sure.
4-liners, then, because they're all connected. So this brings us to the second question, second statement, which perhaps this is not the forum to discuss it in, that are architects just technocrats, or are they just professionals, or do they have a larger sort of stake as individuals, as citizens? Which brings us to the third point, which is, you'd said that cities all over the world, they don't do assessment studies, but then you grapple with problems, and then you find solutions to problems. I think that is why we are in the mess that we are, because we don't do assessments before, because one would just question maybe even the genesis of this project, that without having done the studies, that what is the carrying capacity of this land, of this space? Because from 25,000 to 70,000 more people coming in, they're not going to fly in. I mean, you can say the metro is there, but the metro also has a capacity. I mean, just like these workers whom you're going to house them outside, how are they? You said they'll use the metro, but the metro is also, has a study been done? Maybe it's not overburdened, maybe it can take them, but we would have liked to see those studies so that the project gets justified, that when you are increasing it from 25,000 to 70,000 the capacity, can the traffic take it? What are the environmental issues? What is, I mean, the whole works. And the last point about this craftsmanship, aspect, because you showed a slide where the blue, which is those channels, you showed some slides which are maybe from, I don't know, maybe Singapore or whatever. That's the imagery that you would want. Whereas those two channels, I mean, the craftsmanship which is in them, or the craftsmanship in the street furniture, in the fountains, is heritage. It is. I don't think even the craftsmen today can produce that. So I think those channels and little details. I've taken it from the macro to the absolute micro, but even the bollards. Just to get those bollards made today, the chain fencing. So these are little details which also need to be looked at. Yeah, thank you. Those are the
So I've lost what the points were, but we'll have to go piece by. I completely agree with you that house plan is not like this plan. I just meant to say that plans evolve over a period of time. So that's all. That was the limited purpose of that use of that analogy. I couldn't agree with you better. That we could perhaps get the communications in public projects much better. I've been involved in public projects all my life. I've been very interested in them and actually working with government to get things done. And I believe that we can improve the way in which projects get talked about and discussed a lot. I have found very often myself to be in between concerned people and duly elected people who are both trying to often agree on 9 out of 10 things, but end up fighting on the one thing that they don't agree on. So that is, I think we can improve those. My feeling is that it has and my understanding from whatever I've done up to now is that the problem is on both sides. It's not on one side. The mistrust is heavy on both sides, and it's not one side. And I think I'm hoping that this has to evolve. I'm happy that I've now been authorized to talk about this. I know that an architect needs to talk about the project, consult people, find out what's going on. Otherwise, you just simply don't know what you're designing. And I'm now doing this. The process is underway, and I hope we can deepen it as we go along. And perhaps we can focus on that, then on what has not been achieved up to now is what I'm hoping for. I do agree with you that we do not want to bring Singapore into this. We do not want to bring that kind of, that's not the idea. We do want to bring some aspects of their efficiency, of their productivity, just in the same way that we brought some aspects of the West into here, such as democracy and the Indian Constitution, learning from there. But we want to bring some things, but not really their aesthetic preferences. I've been trying to use as many pictures as I can of examples sometimes that I can find from Delhi, that we are already doing this stuff well. So why not do that sort of? And I would be happy to learn from people who can tell me that's a good way to do it, let's do it. So please feel free. I've had people helping us here, trying to understand better what's the best that has been done here, and some remarkable stuff has been done here. I'm happy to do a lot more of that. Please feel free to write in. I'm not sensitive in that sense. I just think the project is bigger than any one of us, and we must make it work for our sake. It's not my project, it's not yours, it has to be ours. So please feel free about that. With regard to the one thing that I might perhaps disagree with you on is the idea of this carrying capacity idea that is often favored. And here we might just have to disagree. I think that the notion of a fixed carrying capacity of a place is something that people talk about, but there are equally strong arguments to say that that is a concept that can be a little bit tested and stretched. Because if that was true, if the carrying capacity concept was true, we wouldn't have been in the, the world wouldn't have developed at all. Everything has a fixed carrying capacity. If agriculture had fixed carrying capacity, then we should have, there should have been a huge famine, and India should have remained at 500 million instead, or 300 million instead of 1.3 billion. We have now, of course, every time you push the limits, you create new problems and you solve. But ma'am, I would like to say that this is a deep philosophical discussion, perhaps in a setting that is more conducive to doing that, we could have it. I'm not that, therefore, that worried about, I see that if we agree with the idea that we need a central secretariat, and that is necessary for efficient functioning and for various other efficiency reasons and productivity reasons, then we have to try and figure out how to solve the problems rather than see the problems as, and studying the present infrastructure becomes part of that, but not with a view to seeing it as a limit to your carrying capacity, as a way of seeing how that can be transcended. That is how you study these things. That is how the history, I mean, I'd recommend, I don't want to recommend books, but we perhaps have a discussion about this. It's really a philosophical difference. People think this way and that way, and I think we perhaps leave it at that for the time being.
Thank you, Vikas, Sujata, Bimal. We are now going to get questions from the House. We don't have a whole lot of time, so let's keep them sharp, keep them pointed. Please do not repeat questions which have already been asked and answered, because very often that happens. The same question gets, repeated ad infinitum. Can we begin?
Sorry?
Questions?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Can we first, you at the back?
Good evening.
And one second, can I just make a priority list? I saw Arun's hand second, you third, you fourth. Okay, we've got 4 set, and I'll come to you. First, let's do these 4.
Good evening. My name is Aditya Advani. I'm a landscape architect. I just wanted to make a few points about the violation of the basic structure doctrine that you spoke about.
Sir,
One of
I'm
the fields-
extremely sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to add, please go ahead right after I finish. Let's try and focus on questions and
It is
not
a question.
alternate visions,
It
okay?
is
Because that then becomes a whole new different
It
thing.
is a question.
Yeah.
And it's
Go ahead.
One of the things that I feel strongly about is adding the service road that will then become the front face of the building entries from Rajpath side. Currently, I don't believe there's a road there, and I think that takes away from the green space, and that will take away from public access capabilities.
Let's sort that out straight away.
Right.
That's inside the compound, point number 1. That's not outside. There is no access from Rajpath side into the building.
Maybe I misunderstood you. You said the main entrance was from the Rajpath side.
See, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you how it works. Inside the compound, the building is square.
Right.
It has an entrance on Maulana Azad side. It has an entrance on the other side. Any case, a building like that has to have entrance on 2 sides.
Okay.
There's a loop road inside. Presently, also, when you go to Nirman Bhavan, there's a loop road running inside. That's the loop road I'm referring to. Presently, the main entrance in Nirman Bhavan, for example, gate number 1 is facing from Rajpath side. It will continue to face from Rajpath side. There's nothing new that is proposed here.
Okay, because I thought I saw a white strip along the edge of the buildings.
No,
There's not.
you are
Okay.
absolutely right. We cannot have entrances from Rajpath side.
Okay. Okay.
That's out of the question. Please
Okay.
hear me loud and clear. That's not ever been, even the original
Okay.
scheme, that's never been.
My second point is the height of the buildings. I feel you said it would not look out towards the, the trees would block it. But I do feel one of the things about that space is that the the public doesn't feel overwhelmed by the government. And so now these government buildings will be so tall that this will become a very imposing space. That's my viewpoint. Just want to present it to you. If it's possible to lower the buildings, I think it would be much better. I just want to say, I know you said there'll be no fencing, but I just want to reiterate and no fencing of the lawns. You had said there will be no fencing of lawns, but we recently experienced the fencing of the lawns for the war memorial in front of the National Stadium, and I would really implore you to move away from fencing that space at all. It's never been fenced. It was a totally wrong move recently to fence that area. And the slide that Priyolene was talking about, it said lively landscapes. There was a curved thing and all that. So actually, instead of looking towards what you think is being built in Delhi and looking towards that for inspiration, I would say look towards what's already there for inspiration. We don't want it changed. We want it looking amended and sort of improved in the sense, you know, if it's broken, fixed, but it should look exactly the same after it's finished. The Bajri path, the light pole, the bollard with the chain, that's its beauty. That's its excellent beauty. We don't need to add any sort of pizzazz to it at all. That's my feeling. And lastly, I feel about the underpasses across Rajpath. Delhi has had a total disaster making underpasses. They never work. They create humps. They don't go down. I would say don't do underpasses. It never works in Delhi. For some reason, they don't seem to be able to manage a nice, clean underpass that's really underpass. They go up and then they go down, and it becomes a real visual block. It will actually become something terrible. And I would also ask that there should be a strategy for dust management that is put in place, because we have a severe dust problem here. And yeah, in addition to taking down 280 trees, there should be a clear strategy for how the dust will be managed in this massive project.
Should I just?
Yeah, please, please go ahead.
I'll go backwards because the dust is, so yes, definitely everybody talks about this, and understandably in Delhi dust problem. And construction sites become the focus of that, though there could be, you know, a discussion about where the real dust emanates from, etc. But let's not get into that. Whatever needs to be done here is anyways being contemplated to be put into the contract, so that's not an issue. I completely agree with you. I mean, it's always a surprise to me how things get read. We try to put things in ways that are, make presentations that communicate easily. When I said livelier landscape, I mean, many of the trees are looking,
No, it's the images on that slide. Look at the
I
images.
understand,
They're
I
totally
understand.
wrong. All those images are 100% wrong on that one slide.
You got the one.
Yeah, that's the one slide. We're landscape architects. We saw that, and it looked completely wrong to us.
So we will change that, and we will ensure. Yes, there is no intention of making curvilinear paths. I said it many times over, that the structure of the landscape that is there and the elements that are there is precisely what we want to work with. There is nothing else proposed there. I must say, however, that while that is my personal view, and that is, you know, it's not the only view. People talk of change in a lot more easier way than many of us sometimes like. But that's just an observation on. These are, the fun thing about public projects is that we are not the only people. Even as architects, even as experts on this, we are not the only people. And negotiating that is a big part of any public project. Negotiate too hard and you lose the whole game. And negotiate too soft and you lose your game. And so that's really the art of working in this area. Earlier, experts used to be put on a pedestal and used to be thought of as people who knew what's best for everybody. Now, as democracy deepens, there are a lot more people who find their voices and want to say, well, we don't agree with you. So that's what we are playing, and please just keep that in mind. This is more as a discussion with other professionals. You are all involved in such work, and you know what goes on in this sort of stuff. But yes, we are not. I'm conservative about this approach. I'm personally conservative, very conservative about it, and I think the design, in some sense, of the overall thing reflects that. I want to try and do something that builds on the structure, And I think the strength is in the restraint that we are able to keep.
Let's
not
move on,
in-
shall we, Bimal? Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but I think, huh? Yeah, Arun?
Yeah. Embedded between a kind of empiricism which is statistical and desperate search, I think, for a paradigm, something seems to have been lost. And to my mind, this plan is tilted in the favor of a work environment. It's sort of lost the focus on the public, which has appropriated the space in the last 70 years. That tilt is it has shifted. Okay, whether you've created more open space, whether you're cutting more trees, that's all calculations. The fact is that this actually is an opportunity to mediate between people, institutions, and the government. And in fact, the original plan, if you looked at Vijay Chowk area, had other structures which were proposed, and I'm sure you know about them, to mediate that. And perhaps it did it in a very clumsy manner at that time with the National Theatre or whatever it was, other kind of things they had imagined. So, in that sense, I think there is a certain compromise to democratic ideals one would expect from an exercise like this. The second thing is that while you do this, you've also, you have taken public space, you've added, but you've usurped. The whole idea of Janpat was the people's way. By putting these office buildings, I mean, it's not just simply taking off, an ugly building like the new External Affairs Ministry, which the government defended, vehemently in a court recently, as long as 5 years ago, as the ideal architecture they had created. Or the National Museum, which is maybe insignificant for many, but has a purpose. It has a public purpose. And I may even point out that already the ASI building has been demolished. It was a wonderful structure which could have been appropriated also within the plan. And now that space is gone. Is it fair to have these rubber stamps? Is it fair to think of all ministries being the same? Is it an exercise to think, sort of visit the Churchillian viewpoint that you can mold people? Perhaps it requires difference. Perhaps it requires publicness to be incorporated within the space. You see, my reading of the space is completely different. It's not an axios alone. It is an armature. And this armature was strong. Even as a kid, I could walk across North Block and South Block, catch the bus at Central Secretariat and go to school. I could walk through some of these buildings as late in the 80s, walk through, get some chana in the park, get an ice cream and cross and go across to Maulana Azad. Now, everyone has views on buildings which have been created, but the structure is quite different. And perhaps there is a need to recognize this structure which has been appropriated, maybe not physically built on, but perhaps it can sort of be created.
Thanks, Arun. Sorry to cut you off, but I think you made the point.
In that sense, I find that perhaps a little more imagination could help.
Yeah, I think that point has been made. Bimal?
I'm trying to search for the question in that.
Yeah.
The question is that I think there is a problem in how you have compromised basic ideals of democracy, about usurping urban space, about creating rubber stamps, about, it seems the reading of the plan, of the space.
So there's little I can respond to in a particular way of reading a plan, and I understand that there will be different ways of reading any plan. Anything that people do can be read in variety of ways. I'd put forth a reading where we would say, my God, you're taking what was the symbol of the fortress of government and turning it into a public space. Could there be a bigger gesture of what the deepening of the Republic means? I mean, if that doesn't count for anything, and if we are to see what is presently fenced inside that, what is being done, then so be it. I cannot argue more. It takes also some doing to find a way of saying that what is presently the most powerful ministries will come down there, the PMO will come down on the ground, and the public will be put up there on the hill. And if that means for nothing,
Bimal, let me just exercise my position and unfairly interject. I see your point. I see Arun's point. I just wanted to add, I think many of us, and I'll partially on Arun's point, I don't even want an answer, I'll just add it, we feel Janpath has been shortchanged in this scheme. At that, the same office building, which has the front on Maulana Azad, the same front on Rajpath, the same front on Janpath, I think in the Delhi wala's mind, Janpath is quite a special street, and we feel it's been sort of backburnered here. That's it. Next.
Hi, I'm Suruchi, an urban designer. Yes, this project is massive, and it is going to house a lot more people, trigger a lot more development. My question is on that soon we will see a lot of area around it change and transform with time. Is your scheme going to also provide some guidelines for this change to the adjoining areas and maybe go up all? So it's not going to, you're going to leave it?
that's not our brief at this point, and we are not working on any.
Okay, thank you.
You next. I'll put you in it.
Good evening, sir. I'm Ankur Modi. I'm an architect, urban designer myself. I've got two questions for you. And one of the questions is actually more on a follow-on on what Mr. Arun said. But, you know, the idea about what we understand is that the secretariat, the central secretariat blocks, what you have proposed, are to be under highly secured zone. But because they also fall abutting to a large public space of almost a 2-kilometer long, Rajpath, and which is going to be open to public, how are you looking at the character of the threshold between these secretariat block? What could be the specific design which you have in your mind? For example, if I have, as a designer, if I have kind of, you know, I'm putting my aspirations onto it. For example, instead of the courtyard and the beautifully landscaped courtyards, what you have created between the blocks, inside the blocks, if it opens out towards the Rajpath side, or towards the central boulevard, like a C block, inevitably the vehicular movement can happen on the rear end, but at least the buildings open up towards the people from the visual perspective. So it kind of looks into a more openness, maybe. I might be completely wrong into it, but is that, what is your thought in terms of the threshold detail over there, is what I wanted to know.
That's what I believe is appropriate given all the various factors. You know, as designers, there's 50 things we try to factor in,
Sure.
And everything is a trade-off. And that's the conclusion we have come to.
And what are your design?
Let me also say that with regard to security, these blocks with so many people in them are not going to be such high security zones as for example, the Parliament. In the sense that even presently, Nirman Bhavan, I mean, you need authorization to get in, but it's
Pretty okay.
pretty relaxed. My taxi number is given, and they go in and they don't even check the taxi. So it's not as if you need, or the need is felt for a very heavy sort of security there, and remain like that. Perhaps move a little faster, etc.
Okay, can we have 4 more hands? Okay, Sujata, Ujjan, I had seen your hand first. Sorry, I don't know your name. Sujata, Ujjan, Neetu, and Sameer.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sujata Ingorani. I'm a landscape architect.
Okay, quick questions, please.
Yes, Sujata, I know you quite well.
Getting to be drink time, you know.
So basically, we all have studied the place, and there are certain inherent problems which you also showed, that there is a parking issue where the public comes. So are you in any way going to solve that problem? Maybe incorporate that parking within your plot, and the edge condition of the, whatever you said, like, you know, you're going to have a grill and then the building inside. can that be better? Because what he
That's,
was also
that's
talking
exactly what we are going to do.
Yeah.
Between the water body and the present fence, there's a lot of space which is presently being used for parking in a disorganized manner in many places, and that is to be used for public parking in future too.
That should not be, like, the edge condition of the central vista should be a public space, which, you know, is more interactive. Maybe parking can be behind it. Like, you can have some use, which is kind
Yes,
of interactive.
yes, you're
instead
right.
of a
It's not,
grill
it's
or
not,
a-
it's
yeah.
not the water body se parking chalu ho jata hai. That's not the
Yeah,
idea.
so that is
I'm
something
saying
we
generally
can look
speaking,
into.
in that area is parking. But as I've said to Sujata earlier, the other Sujata,
Yeah.
that
Another thing,
when this has been
Yeah.
thought out,
Yeah.
we will share it with you, and we're happy to get your comments. It would help. And so
Another little
let's leave
point
it
that
till
I
then.
had, you showed 3 blocks with a grill. So you're having a 150-meter grid for a TOD block. So the, you know, people should be able to move through those, you know, those little slivers of space in between the donuts. So is that the, you know, like the
No, that's a fire tender entry.
No,
in the
from
donut.
the central vista, if people want to, is it for us? Yeah, is it for us?
Why don't you go back to the...
If it's a transit-oriented development project, then the movement of people, you
No,
know.
ma'am, what we are thinking about is these 3 buildings are inside one compound so that they can have a common entry and exit points, and that's not a public access. Even presently, there is none.
So then the block size becomes as big.
As
3
big as
blocks.
it is today. Exactly as big as
But
it is
then,
today.
like,
Today, what it is what it becomes. And it's, there is a trade-off there. Yes, I understand if you were to give from Maulana Azad side road, but how many people, pedestrians cross from Maulana Azad into
No, what
this area?
the people who are in this particular block, how they move into the central vista? A lot
No,
of
they
people,
don't. They are office workers. They are inside the
A
office.
lot of people actually have studied the
cut
place.
through.
A
So,
lot
so,
of people go
so
into
if there
the
are pedestrian entries
Yes.
into that is okay. That's not a problem. I'm
I'm
talking about
pedestrian.
vehicular entries. There's no
not
vehicular.
vehicular.
There's no vehicular.
Pedestrian.
Yeah, no, that is acceptable. That is not a problem. Yeah, but that's not. Thank you for that, because not thought of that earlier. But that's something that if the office goers want to go on to Central Drive.
Enough, please, sorry. We have to carry on, otherwise you'll grab it all. Ujjan. It's on, red light.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Bimal, this is a little non-design question here. I guess I'm suffering from Amravati syndrome. Really, seriously, what I'm saying, I'm sure you've sorted it out. It's a large project. You have a time frame which is yourself saying very tight, and certain things are not in our hand, no matter what you do. I'm just wondering if something really happens, it doesn't finish in 24, and the inevitable happens, and we don't want to get stuck with 3 buildings with reinforcement sticking out and, you know, debris lying around. So I think there could be something in the design, in phasing and all that. You must be thinking that, you know, if something happens, what do you do?
If you have any good ideas, I'll be very.
Call me later. No, really, I really want to answer. I mean, what do you think? You're so confident it'll be done.
No, I'm not confident it'll be done.
No,
If
you
there
are.
is-
You said you
No,
are.
no, I'm not. I mean, I believe that if a lot of people work the way they are working right now, then we can get it done. It would be a tremendous achievement to
But how
say-
much, sorry, how much do you think will get done? All of it or part of it?
All of it is the idea. All of it can be
Oh.
done. All of it can be done. If people in the world build fast,
Yeah,
we don't, you know,
But
my
our-
first
our-
building.
We don't have a history about that.
My first building was 7 lakh square feet in 7 years. You know, not first building, one of the early.
Not
you know,
much has, I'm not talking about you, but generally not much has changed.
Well, that's precisely.
No, but I'm sure there's a phasing.
There is
sort
a
of
meta
hierarchical
objective
plan
to
of
this
the
project to say, listen, enough is enough. We'll better learn how to get this thing done fast. So that's the
No, can't you-
objective.
no,
I'm not going to quarrel with that objective. I'm going to help make it happen to the best possible way I can, is what I'm trying to tell you. Everybody presently is also trying to do that within government. If that works and we pull it off, my God, what a sense of confidence it gives us as a country, as somebody. And that's what is being attempted. am I certain that it'll finish? Can anybody be certain about any such thing? What would happen if it is not finished? I know, I mean, I can imagine it's not a good idea. But if you have good ideas, let me know how to proof it from that race.
Me too.
She-
Hello
her
everyone,
hand was up
I'm
first.
Meetu Mathur, architect and urban designer. My question is actually an extension to Mr. Jan's question only. Like you said during the presentation that a lot of buildings specifically are in the process of still designing. So being a democratic design, how can people like us in the room participate in the process of designing and in some way or the other expedite the process of construction and make it actually happen in a record time?
Ma'am, I understand the sentiment with which you are saying this, and it's sincere and genuine. But remember that if, you design, I design buildings, we are phasing them out so that we are able to finish, and we don't need to start buildings at the same time in any case. So we're there are 6 buildings to design, 6 or 10 buildings, and we are phasing them out. We believe that that can be handled in the way that we are doing. Design and democracy, I mean, they're nice, both go together, sort of. But you see, what happens is while, for example, in our office, I believe that we work in teams. We believe extremely in working in teams. But work in teams happens when there is clear leadership. No team can function without a leader. And that leader has to then take the blame or whatever and get on with it. And so that's the design process. It's very difficult for other firms to quickly join into such a process and make this whole thing happen. You've all worked. I bring in as many people as I can, but those hierarchies don't work.
My question is misinterpreted. I'm not saying that other firms should join, but in a way of making this project to speeden up the process of the project, has there been a strategy in place to phase it out, not like doing one by one, to actually start the construction or to make these individual projects take place at the same time?
No, ma'am, they cannot be done because many of this is sequenced. It's just simply, the phasing is not something that we are making use of it, but you can't disrupt any government activity. So unless this is finished, you cannot do this. And that sort of sequencing is automatically giving us time to phase out the...
And any interesting...
Meetu, I think that sort of answered the thing,
small
yeah.
question. Any interesting construction technology that you'll be putting into place?
We are exploring, but as of now, conventional seems to be the best way out.
Thanks. I mean, I think that's a very interesting point, but maybe another forum. Samir?
Good evening. I'm Samir Chadda, an urban designer. So first, thanks for your contributions to some great buildings and campuses and public open spaces in the country. So a couple of questions related. So the one responsibility and onus a designer or any expert has is to share his expertise, right, with people around, including the client, right? So I'm curious to know how you and your team are kind of trying to influence the brief or guide the brief to bring some important urban design issues to the fore and what they may be, right? For example, number 2 question, related question is on the importance, which many people have kind of touched upon, the importance of public realm, right? The publicness of our streets, our open spaces and buildings. Today, it is rare to see a democratic country which has a focus of a single use in the center of a city in a country of government use, right? So rather than this being a vibrant people center, like you're showing Paris or DC, which is very interesting because DC also, I gather, has a very similar width of the central space, about 250 meters, and a length of about 1.5 kilometers from 3 to the river and 1.5 from, I think, the capital to the symbol in the middle. In any case, so rather than a vibrant people center like DC Mall, which is very similar layout, the new Central Vista seems to be shaping more towards, I must say, an East Bloc country. There's 3 million square meters, approximately, including all built up area, 10 buildings, 10 plus buildings, lining the central vista, 1.5 kilometers of it, from Resina Hill to India Gate, which seems boring, because at best, the buildings have backs onto to the open space. At worst, the security requirements will kind of hinder the kind of interaction with the people, the way the people can kind of hang out there, which may stifle freedom of movement, group activity, privacy, and the general enjoyment of the place. So in summary, how do you see the intent and quality of the public realm in this most important civic space? And what related aspects may you be educating stakeholders and decision makers about in this space?
Well, as I said, about readings of what's happening I don't want to comment straight away on that. I want to say that the significance of expanding public space onto Raisina Hill is, I think, you're being uncharitable. I think that that's a very big move. That's a very, very big move, and to transform what is earlier literally the fortress of government into a public institution, or what's being done at the back of Rashtrapati Bhavan, is very important symbolic moves that reinforce the publicness of this place. This place is presently there's no structure that is, in the sense of access, in any real terms, nothing is changing in the central space. It's appropriated by people, it's used by people, extensively used by people, and we want it to continue. If the question is whether this could have been like Champs-Élysées, on both sides have a mall or something, or have some other facilities, well, many things are possible, but that's not.
But that's an important, just to interject, that's a very important aspect, right? DC has museums and public buildings kind of lining the mall, which are very active. People walk back and forth. They can walk up to the facade, they can enter the building.
But we have taken the two big buildings of government, turning them into
That
museums.
is appreciated. That is obviously,
So,
I think...
so if that is insufficient in a gesture, then, well, what am I going to say? I'm saying that there is presently no such thing there, and it's being put up there. And that's what we can get at this stage. And that's what we...
But that is what the larger Lutyens area suffers as well at the moment.
Well, on
it is one of the, just to finish one point, it is one of the lowest density, lowest public use, lowest street activity areas in, for the center, democratic center of our country. And the CV is part of the center of that larger Lutyens area.
So what is happening is that the absolute center of the center, which is the Grand Avenue, and the two buildings in the center, is becoming public. Is public. Dil mange more? Yes, maybe more.
But the public road is Janpath. That's where the National Museum is.
Yes, that is how it was conceived, but it has never emerged in the way. I understand what Anurag is talking about. It's never emerged as the walking artery, as the shopping artery of this place. It never emerged. In fact, what was the King's Way has become more and more the people's way, and now, if I may say, going up from India Gate up to this is the Janpath. It's no longer the Rajpath.
No, but this museum...
So in that sense, take that as the big move, so to say.
So two concrete suggestions.
Okay.
Two concrete suggestions to sum it up. One, yes, there could be more mixed use in terms of having other uses along, more people-friendly uses along the central vista, number one. Number two, the ministries themselves could have, like, how should government change in a democracy? I mean, there should be a friendly department or a public space which is open in every block to see what our ministries are doing, what transparency is there, what, initiatives are being put
I
up.
think he mentioned exhibition halls on the ground floor of each building. Perhaps it's not apparent in the plan.
The building of our republic is not to end with our generation and with us and with this one project. Many of these things that you are talking about are things that the structure should allow to do. And I believe it does. Suppose you wanted to create this exhibition hall as an open space in some future date when security was little less of a concern, or you found some way of making it accessible. You should be able to do that. Let's not believe that once it's done, the die is cast and that's what it's going to be. These things evolve over a period of time. Real cities, that's how they have evolved. They were not, the publicness of the public places you see in the West were not always like that.
No. Not just one, it'll be 4 or none. Do we have time for 4 more people?
No.
Or are you done?
We do one more. No, I'm sorry about this because I have an engagement. I thought this was to start at 5:30.
Yeah.
I had an engagement at 8 o'clock. It's already 8:45. I can't keep my people waiting for much longer. So I'd love to do this. I hope we do it a second time.
Can we do one?
We can do one.
Okay, Rohit, you're in, and that's it. Lots of lobbying on your behalf.
You got your turn yesterday. You got your turn yesterday.
This is the first time I'm seeing your presentation, Bimal. But congrats on presenting and on your people's skill. But I just have 2 things for you. One is that you've been highlighting this, the North and South Block as this, as something which you're giving back to the city, and as this, and it's essentially an adaptive reuse project. So 2 questions regarding that. Why can't the rest of the space be also use similar concepts of adaptive reuse, and you conserve precious building materials, you save us from a lot of dust and pollution as this project goes on? That's one thing. And the second thing is you try and show these buildings, and we know the museum culture of our society. We know the level we are at with respect to historicity, archiving, museums. And you are directly showing us what is the best in the world, Louvre. And so if you have the capacity, I don't know who's doing the curation, who's renovating those buildings into museums, but if you have that capacity to remodel those buildings to the level of Louvre, why don't we have that capacity for the other buildings too? Because museums at that global level are extremely sophisticated pieces of work in terms of all sorts of infrastructure that goes into it. So is there a thought behind that?
Well, I don't know how to answer that, because you're saying, let's just have museums and not have a central secretariat. That's not the project.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you adaptive reuse, that's what you're highlighting as something you're giving back to the public, and that's actually an adaptive reuse project, that you're taking away the offices from that block and putting in. So why can't the other buildings which are demolishing and all, can it be not looked
at
as
adaptive?
Buildings? National Museum, the archives.
Because you won't get amount of floor space that you need. You see, you are in the business too. It's a business of trade-offs. It's not a business of having everything the way you want. And as soon as you examine all the things that are needed, that's the trade-off that emerges. And that's the best trade-off you can get, is what I would say. So, dissatisfied with it, maybe, but that's the real possibility.
Okay, then another trade-off of time, because what I'm seeing is when you have the 2-year restriction, which is obviously not your restriction, but the government has imposed on you, you're sacrificing on a lot of innovative ways of thinking. Just a couple of years ago, there was a competition for, I think, along with the memorial for a museum, where a lot of architects thought very innovatively of how to save the trees and build around those trees, and they came up with fantastic stuff. And I know that you can't do everything in 2 years, and because of that, a lot is being sacrificed. So is there a way, going back to then Ojan's question, is to phase things out that okay, there may be a block where you do, the trees are they go, but 5 years down the line, hopefully with the government, whether it's the same government or a different government, they proceed, but with a different tactic for the next block. where you save the trees. Because we are compromising a lot of issues here in that way, because of time.
There's no question there.
It's a suggestion.
It's a suggestion. Suggestion. There's no question there for me to respond to. Yes.
Okay, let me just, I think, close this because I think everyone is, at least Bimal has to get away, and our sort of time is up at 8:30.
I'm sorry for...
No, that's all right. That's all right. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you for speaking, Bimal, and to ISOLA and IUDI people for organizing this. Just one quick thing. A project of this significance, of this size, and in this location is inevitably going to invite vast amount of public and institutional scrutiny. I mean, you know that's part of the game, and you've dealt with it before. At the same time, and not also, these are public lands and public taxpayer money which is being used. Right, government is using it, and we have in our sort of wisdom appointed government as the person who will decide how we use our land and our funds, so we can't really say that we are all going to be a detailed part of the process. But anyway, I think we need to do more of this. I think, and that in the end, it's the prerogative of the client and the designer how much our suggestions are taken on board, and whether they find them valid. They may have a whole different thought process which we are not privy to. But what I would say is that I think we should do this, if possible, on a more regular basis, and not just for this particular public project, for other public projects. So much happens in Delhi, and you wake up one morning and find, oh my God, this happened, And so I find that very valuable, and I hope we can sustain this process. Thank you all.
Before everyone leaves, I just want to say that, just taking the thing from what Anurag said, this is a continuous process, and we'll welcome, because we want to carry on working with Bimal on this project. So whatever your feedback, comments, this thing doesn't finishes with this meeting, so we should continue, and we would really like to get your feedbacks on the points, whatever we haven't taken this time from other people. So it'll be nice to get your points, and we will continue working.
Amravati, Saria project, Ujan Saria.
Thank you all very much. Thank you very much. So, well, you're not going.